The secret psychology of people who don't care about birthdays. There's a strange kind of person out there, the kind who doesn't care about their birthday. You know the one. While others count down the days, plan parties, post Instagram stories, and expect balloons, this person shrugs. Maybe they even forget their own birthday. Or if they do remember, they'd rather spend it alone in silence or doing something completely ordinary. And we often think, what's wrong with them? Why don't they celebrate? Don't they know it's supposed to be a special day? But what if the answer is far more profound than we think? What if not caring about birthdays isn't a sign of emotional detachment but a subtle, powerful philosophy? A way of seeing life that exposes something essential about the human condition. Today we're going deep into the secret psychology of people who don't care about birthdays. And by the end of this video, you might discover that they're not the strange ones. Maybe they're the ones who've started asking the right questions. Let's begin with a paradox. We live in a culture obsessed with time and terrified of it at the same time. We measure it, celebrate it, track it, fear it. Birthdays are the perfect symbol of that contradiction. On the surface, they're a celebration of life, another year survived, another trip around the sun. But underneath, there's a shadow, a deeper anxiety. Because to celebrate a birthday is to acknowledge the passing of time. And in a world that worships youth, productivity, and novelty, each birthday is a subtle reminder of mortality, of impermanence, of the fact that we are, all of us, aging toward an unknown end. And so, we cover that discomfort with cake and candles. We turn the existential threat into a party. It's not wrong. In fact, it's human. But those who don't care about birthdays, those who opt out, might be doing something radically different. They might be rejecting the illusion. They might be saying, why should I celebrate the passage of time as if it's an achievement? Why should I pretend that growing older makes me more real, more worthy, more valid? For them, the self is not a timeline. It's not a collection of age-based milestones. It's something deeper, something harder to define. And in that resistance to celebration, there's often a quiet rebellion against the way society measures value.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
You see, people who don't care about birthdays are often people who've had to grow up fast. Maybe they were forced into emotional maturity early through trauma, illness, or loss. Maybe they've seen how arbitrary the calendar can be when you're in survival mode. When every day feels like a lifetime, the idea of waiting for a specific date to feel celebrated can seem absurd. Or maybe they've realized something even deeper, that meaning isn't always tied to dates. That significance doesn't need to be scheduled. That life is sacred in its everydayness, not just in its anniversaries. Let me ask you a confronting question. Why do you need your birthday to feel important? Is it because it reminds you that you matter, that people care, that your existence is acknowledged? And if so, what does that say about the rest of the year? What are we really celebrating when we celebrate birthdays? Is it the person, or is it the idea of the person as society expects them to be at a particular age? At 30, you should have this. At 40, you should be that. At 50, you should know who you are. But what if you don't? What if your inner timeline doesn't match the outer one? For those who don't care about birthdays, this mismatch is often the beginning of a deeper inquiry. They begin to question all of it, the social scripts, the rituals, the silent expectations. They start to deconstruct what it means to grow, to mature, to succeed. And in doing so, they often find themselves outside the system, not in a rebellious way, but in a contemplative one. They become observers of the human game, not just players in it. And the more they observe, the more they realize that most people are following scripts they never wrote, measuring their lives with tools they never chose. This isn't about being cynical. It's about being awake. It's about asking, what is the self really? Is it the accumulation of years? Is it a name on a cake once a year? Or is it something more fluid, more mysterious, something that can't be pinned down by dates or decorations? Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, But becoming is not a linear process. It doesn't happen cleanly from one birthday to the next. It happens in the cracks, in the questions, in the moments that don't make it to social media. So maybe the person who doesn't care about birthdays isn't apathetic. Maybe they've just started to see through the illusion. Maybe they're asking, why wait for a specific day to feel celebrated? Why not live every day as if it matters? Or better yet, why do I need external validation to know that I do? And this leads us to something deeper, something that people who don't care about birthdays often wrestle with in silence: the question of identity. Because when we strip away the rituals, the dates, the social expectations, what's left? Who are we without the party, the gifts, the attention? Can we still feel like we matter? Beyond the balloons, why the rejection of celebration is often a sign of emotional depth, not detachment. It's easy to misread people who don't care about birthdays. From the outside, they can seem cold, indifferent, maybe even bitter. But underneath that surface, something much more complex is unfolding. The absence of interest in celebration isn't always a void. It can be a space filled with quiet sensitivity, deep emotional processing, and a different relationship to meaning. In a world where joy is often loud, externally validated, and performance-based, choosing not to celebrate or even resisting the idea of being celebrated can be a profound psychological stance. It's not that these individuals don't feel. It's that they feel deeply, and often in ways that don't fit into the container of a birthday party. You have to understand, not everyone experiences validation the same way. While some people thrive in moments of attention and recognition, others find it alienating. Not because they hate people, not because they're antisocial, but because the ritual of celebration feels disconnected from their internal world. Imagine going through a year of inner transformation, quietly healing from grief, navigating existential questions, or facing your own shadow, and then being expected to smile at a cake and make small talk over drinks. The contrast can be jarring. It's not that the moment is meaningless. It's that the meaning doesn't match the moment. There's a kind of person who would rather sit in silence and reflect on the past year than be sung to in a crowded room. Someone who'd rather write in a journal than unwrap a gift. Someone who doesn't need a calendar to tell them when to feel grateful, nostalgic, or proud because they live with those emotions every day. These are people who find meaning in solitude, in depth, in the invisible currents of life that most others miss because they're too busy decorating. And so, when they choose not to engage in the traditional birthday script, it's not a rejection of joy, it's a redefinition of it. Let's flip the question. Why do we expect everyone to celebrate the same way? Why is a birthday lunch seen as more valid than a quiet walk in nature, or a day of volunteering, or even doing absolutely nothing? We've been conditioned to believe that celebration must be visible, that it must look a certain way to be real. But what if the most meaningful moments are the ones no one sees? What if the person who doesn't care about birthdays is actually someone who finds value in authenticity over performance? This is where emotional depth comes in. Many of the people who reject birthdays are not emotionally shallow, they're emotionally overwhelmed by the weight of what a birthday represents. To them, it's not just a party, it's a confrontation, a ritual that forces them to reflect on how they've changed or failed to in another cycle of life. It's a mirror. And not everyone is ready or willing to look into it with others watching. So instead, they retreat, not to escape, but to process, to feel on their own terms, to honor their life in a way that aligns with their emotional reality, not with cultural expectations. There's also a psychological element that's rarely discussed. For some, birthdays are a reminder of what's been lost. A parent who used to call but no longer can. A friend who's no longer around. A version of themselves that no longer fits. And in that context, celebration can feel hollow or even painful. It's not about being negative, it's about being honest. Emotionally intelligent people often struggle with forced positivity. They're not interested in pretending everything is fine just because society says it's time to smile. They'd rather sit with what's real, even if it's uncomfortable. So when someone says they don't care about birthdays, maybe it's not detachment, but discernment. Maybe they've realized that meaning isn't found in the decorations, but in the depth of self-awareness. That growing older isn't just about candles, it's about consciousness. And that celebrating life doesn't always require a stage. Sometimes it just requires presence. Let me ask you a question that might change how you see these people. What if the rejection of celebration is actually a form of reverence? What if, in refusing to perform, they're honoring something sacred? Something that can't be captured in a song or a toast or even a well-meaning hug. Because maybe the people who don't care about birthdays aren't lacking joy, they're just not willing to fake it. The calendar illusion, how birthdays trick us into measuring life by quantity instead of quality. One of the most dangerous illusions we inherit without question is the idea that time equals progress, that the more years we accumulate, the more life we've lived. Birthdays, for all their festivity, often reinforce this illusion. They place us on a timeline: year 1, year 10, year 25, year 50, as if the mere passage of time necessarily marks growth, wisdom, or personal evolution. But does it? Does turning another year older automatically mean we've become more ourselves, more fulfilled, more conscious? Or are we just counting numbers and mistaking them for meaning? This is where the psychology of those who don't care about birthdays becomes quietly revolutionary. They're not rejecting celebration out of apathy, but recognizing that the calendar doesn't define the soul. Because let's be honest, some people live 80 years and never truly live. Others live intensely, vibrantly, meaningfully for just a fraction of that time. Quantity is not quality. Time is not depth. And yet, year after year, we act as though the number on the cake is a badge of honor. We say things like, "She just turned 30," or "He's almost 50," as though the number conveys something essential. But what does it really say? Nothing about the person's kindness, their self-awareness, their integrity, their courage. Just a number, just a date. This is the calendar illusion, the belief that life is best understood in milestones instead of moments. That we can measure the richness of a life by how many birthdays have been celebrated, instead of by how deeply we've loved, how courageously we've questioned, or how honestly we've lived. People who don't care about birthdays often see through this. They've stopped counting and started being. Because they understand that the most important parts of life don't happen on schedule. No calendar ever planned your most meaningful conversation. No birthday party ever guaranteed a breakthrough. Life happens in the unscheduled spaces, the quiet mornings, the unexpected tears, the moments of stillness when everything suddenly makes sense. Let me ask you something bold. Is your life unfolding because of the calendar or in spite of it? Are you living on a timeline that was handed to you, or one that you created consciously? So many of us are imprisoned by invisible expectations. According to the cultural script, you're supposed to do certain things by certain ages: graduate by 22, find love by 30, have kids by 35, retire by 65. But what happens when your soul doesn't follow that script? What happens when you wake up at 40 and realize you've been climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall? The people who don't care about birthdays often have stepped off that ladder. They've stopped measuring themselves against society's timeline. And in doing so, they've gained something rare: freedom. A freedom to live each moment as it is, not as it's supposed to be. A freedom to evolve at their own pace, to define success on their own terms. And in that freedom, there's a kind of quiet rebellion. A refusal to let the calendar dictate their worth. There's also a deep humility in this mindset. Because when you stop tracking your life in years, you become more present to the quality of your being. You start asking different questions: not "How old am I?" but "How awake am I?" Not "What have I accomplished by now?" but "Who am I becoming right now?" The external timeline begins to fade, and what emerges is something far more powerful: an internal compass. A way of navigating life not by dates, but by depth. So perhaps the people who don't care about birthdays aren't lost, they're found. Found in the spaces between celebrations. Found in the moments that can't be measured. Found in the texture of real, unfiltered life. They are often the ones who have stopped asking, "What should I have achieved by now?" and started asking, "What matters to me with the time I have left?" And that question, simple, clear, and terrifying, is the beginning of true wisdom. The invisible self, why refusing birthday attention can be a journey into the core of identity. There's something strangely powerful about invisibility. In a world obsessed with recognition, applause, and being seen, choosing not to draw attention to yourself, especially on a day designed for that very purpose, can be a radical act of self-exploration. The person who doesn't care about birthdays might not be avoiding attention out of shyness or awkwardness, but because they're engaged in something deeper, the unraveling of the self, the real self, the self that exists beneath the stories, the achievements, the roles we've been taught to perform. And birthdays, with all their social rituals and emotional expectations, can feel like a disruption to that process. A loud interruption to a quiet question, who am I when no one is looking? To refuse birthday attention is to step away from performance. It's to say, I am not defined by how many people post on my timeline today. It's to reject the idea that validation must come in the form of cake, candles, and curated moments. And in that rejection, there's often a quiet turning inward, not from bitterness, but from curiosity. Because when you stop focusing on how others see you, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You begin to ask questions that pierce through the surface. What parts of me are real? What parts are inherited? What do I do because it's expected? And what do I do because it's true? This is the invisible self, the one that doesn't seek the spotlight, not because it fears it, but because it no longer needs it. The one that understands that identity is not strengthened by attention, but by awareness. And birthdays, with their social gravity, often pull us into the orbit of other people's definitions. You're 30 now, you should be doing this. You're 40, you should know that. But what if that gravitational pull is exactly what needs to be escaped? What if refusing birthday attention is a way of stepping outside the orbit, floating in the uncertainty of self-discovery and realizing, I'm not who I thought I was, and that's okay. There's also something deeply spiritual about this perspective. Many ancient traditions speak of ego dissolution not as a loss, but as a return to the essence of being, stripped of all labels and time-based identities. And in that context, refusing to celebrate a birthday isn't just personal preference, it can be an act of spiritual clarity. A recognition that the self is not a fixed point in time, but a fluid, evolving mystery. That we are not the age we are told, nor the person others project onto us, but a living question, a becoming. Let me ask you something that might stay with you long after this video is over. Who would you be if no one celebrated you? If no one remembered your birthday? If the world gave you no applause? Would you still feel real? Would you still feel worthy? Would you still feel alive? Because the answer to that question reveals something essential. It shows you where your sense of self comes from. Is it internal or external? Is it rooted in being or in being seen? Ultimately, the psychology of people who don't care about birthdays isn't about indifference, it's about depth. It's about a slow, quiet search for meaning in a world that equates visibility with value. It's about decentering the ego, not because they hate themselves, but because they're no longer fooled by the glitter of attention. It's about finding the kind of peace that doesn't need a party to exist. A peace that comes from knowing, I am real, even in silence. I matter, even in stillness. I exist, even when no one is watching. And maybe that's the final secret, that the truest form of celebration isn't external at all. It isn't marked by a date or a gift or a crowd. It's marked by presence, by awareness, by the rare and sacred moment when you sit with yourself, without distraction, and realize, I am here, I am enough, I am becoming. That kind of celebration doesn't need a birthday. It just needs you, and you're already here.